This might be a dumb question, but is a book supposed to be fun while you read it? Or is a book supposed to be thought provoking and fun to discuss after you're done reading it? The very best books are both fun and interesting. The first chapter of Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace comes to mind. Infinite Jest is a 1,000-page book, yet by the time you finish that first chapter, if you're anything like me, you never want to put it down. You feel like you can read the whole thing in one sitting because the first chapter is fun to read and fun to analyze. It's an incredibly engaging short story that makes for a thrilling, captivating read, but it leaves you questioning everything. That whole book, Infinite Jest, to some extent, is like that. And I think that's why a postmodern 1,000-page book like Infinite Jest has become culturally canon, at least enough that like all the bookish people know about it. And if you're not into books, you might make fun of it. Like, oh, you mentioned Infinite Jest, you hipster, you know what I mean? Like it's got a reputation. And I think it's that fun of discussing it plus the fun of reading it. In contrast to Infinite Jest, James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is an incredibly difficult read for how short the book is. It's just, what, 90,000 words. It's about 250 pages, and it's like a pretty small book. I left it in the other room, but I'd show you it's quite small. And yet, I found I had to summon my full wits about me just to comprehend what the hell I was reading. Like, every day I would prime my mind. You understand? I would drink some coffee, do some yoga, do a lunge. Oh, get real good with it. Do some squats. Down, let's go. It's early. I should probably be careful before I hurt myself. But you know what I'm saying? I'd get myself going, and I would then make my best attempt to read and actually understand at least 10 pages. That was my goal. 10 pages, which is a very low goal. I mean, I'm an avid reader, so 10 pages isn't that much. That was my goal every day because it's just so hard to like lock in and really receive what James Joyce is trying to deliver. Yet, over the course of a few weeks, I did manage to read this thing. And while there were a few high points, which I'll discuss, it's definitely a fun book to talk about, but it's just not fun to read. And while I feel like the book has elements of brilliance, it does also have some really big weaknesses as well. So, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, the ending is terrible. I'm not going to spoil it. No spoilers. Not that there's really not that much to spoil. It's not like a plot-based book really, but after 5 chapters of ambitious literary stuff, Joyce randomly switches his style to diary entries. The last 4 or 5 pages are the main character's diary entries, which, in my opinion, makes for a weird, awkward, wet fart of an ending to such a tightly composed book. It's like you had this beautiful meal, and then at the end, the chef walks up and farts in your face. It's just like, where did this come from? What's going on? I had the nice wine, a nice steak, my vegetables, some cool thing, and then what is this ending? Why did you just fart in my face? I'm so confused. Like, it's like the book randomly switches to bad fanfic, like you shoved a few pages of Twilight in at the end just to see if I'm paying attention. It's so odd to me. Like, what is up with that ending? Did the editors make him do it? I don't know what the hell is up with that. Even that, though, is interesting to discuss. And that's what's so messed up about this book. Even the bad parts are like fodder for discussion. Why? Why did you do that? Where did that decision come from? It just seems like there's such a thought process behind everything in the book that it makes you, kind of wonder, is there a good reason? Is the book wrong or am I wrong? When it comes to the ending, by the way, the book is wrong. The ending is dog shit. But still, it makes you ask. And I think that's the book's strong suit, is that even the more annoying parts are fun to talk about. Now, getting into some of the strong aspects of the book, what Joyce accomplishes here with Portrait is to express the experience of growing up through language itself. The events of the story via his semi-autographical stand-in character, Stephen Dedalus, because this book is based at least somewhat on Joyce's actual childhood. The events of the story are secondary to the way in which those events are told. The language grows, starting with a simple childlike beginning and an iconic opening to the book. I don't have it in front of me, but once upon a time, and a very good time it was, there was a moo cow coming down the road and found a baby tuckoo. And he says something about the boy is nice or the cow is nice, but he says he's nicens, which isn't a real word. So it's like this weird opening thing. And then it grows and evolves meticulously to a linguistic peak of Shakespearean intensity. Maybe Shakespeare. I actually haven't read much Shakespeare, but it's very poetic at the end of chapter 4, where Stephen's religious rapture slash sexual desire, I kind of forget what it is, something pushes his mind into what's basically a psychedelic state. I mean, if he had done acid, which I don't think existed yet, but if he'd done psychedelics, this language would also kind of make sense. It just goes ridiculously poetic. It's so intense and it's so literary. It's like watching a jazz soloist 10 minutes after the buildup, finally hitting the big, crazy riffs, the high notes, the fast stuff, like after like working the way there. Like that chapter 4 ending is so nutty. And it's that range from chapter 1's infantile beginnings all the way to chapter 4's epic climax, followed by chapter 5's more slapstick and conversational college school scenes with kids just kind of talking shit, like college aged. That's what makes the book so good. It's an exploration of style and of human psychology, boistered by the fact that only 2 years prior, Joyce's short story collection Dubliners was published, and that's a very tightly composed book. The writing style is much more conventional, so he really proved he can do it the normal way, and then he showed another way to do it. And I think that is part of what made this book be received so well and be able to get into the canon. I don't know Joyce's like life story or anything, but that makes sense to me because it's definitely like he kind of earned the right to do some weird stuff with that Dubliners book first. And yeah, the exploration of language is so good. My favorite part to read while I was reading. Well, hold on, let me back up. So yeah, no. My favorite part to read, let's talk about some more of the good stuff. My favorite part was chapter 3. Stephen goes to Catholic school and he gets this intense sermon from the priest. He's like in a class, and it's all about the horrors of hell, breaking down the physical and spiritual torments that await anybody who fails to repent. You must repent, and I found that really interesting. Like, it's this 10 to 20 pages of just sermons, but it's really like intense, and it makes for this maximum, probably the most intense negative energy, the scariest thing in the book, which is just this brimstone and hellfire sermon. I was raised in a relaxed religious environment. I didn't get that fear of God, hellfire type stuff in my upbringing. I mean, in Reform Judaism, we don't really have that concept of hell. So I found it very interesting to get that perspective. And I did find chapter 3 to be the most fun. I can imagine if I was 14 sitting in a church in late 1800s Ireland and a priest was describing the tortures of hell for all eternity that I'm going to suffer if I don't repent. I mean, geez, I probably would have been scared straight, Holy shit. Which makes it all the more interesting that Joyce, via his character of Stephen Dedalus, actually doesn't really get tamed by that. He actually rebels against that eventually. The second favorite part for me was chapter 5, which provides some relief from the literary intensity. After 4 chapters of a lot of artsy stuff, you kind of get into a more conventional slapstick scene with school kids in a college environment, talking shit, bickering, going back and forth, making wisecracks, making fun of each other, making silly jokes. I would actually enjoy to read a lot more of that. Like this more conversational slapstick side of Joyce, it's actually really good. He makes some jokes that had me like laughing a little bit, and that's 150 years removed culturally, where humor doesn't usually age very well. So it's just like a really good style, and I would enjoy a lot more of this. It's too bad I don't think he did a lot more of that, at least in Dubliners and in Portrait of the Artist. This chapter 5, like the first 2/3 of chapter 5 or so, it's like a very cool style that I actually found myself wanting more of. It was fun to read. Unfortunately, though, overall, unfortunately, or it is what it is, the book is very fun to think about, very fun to discuss, very fun to analyze, just not fun to read. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I think it's okay once in a while. This is the kind of book I enjoy as long as I get some easier or more immediate books in the middle. I need to read some stuff that I can just get sucked in and read 100 pages in an afternoon because I'm just having fun. Like, I need one of those. I need a couple of those in between these discussion-oriented books, because otherwise it starts to feel like a job. And I read for fun. I didn't get in this to suffer. I'm not reading out of masochism. Like, I enjoy reading. The point is that it's fun. When I was young, I read books every day. It's just a thing that I have. It's just how I am. So I like to find books that are fun to read. And I think that's one of those things school kind of gives people the wrong idea. Like, every book is just analysis and learning lessons, and it's boring. And it's no, like, books should be fun. Like Harry Potter or whatever shit like that, like popular series, those are great. Like, people should have fun reading books. Like, I'm all about Angels and Demons or Harry Potter or whatever the hell people want to read. I'm using the old references. I don't know what is even popular in books these days. I don't know. I'm a hipster. Anyway, I'm curious to read Ulysses, even try a little bit of Finnegan's Wake. No interest in trying to go front to back, but Finnegan's Wake could be fun to look at. I'll probably procrastinate for a few years, though. This was enough Joyce for a while. But if you are a literary person, if you enjoy reading and discussing fancy books, you've got to read A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. It is a reasonably short read. You can push through, and I do feel like for the rest of my life, I'm going to be discussing this book now and then. Whenever I run into another literary-minded person, I'll be like, have you read Joyce? Have you read A Portrait of the Artist? What do you think about? I don't know. I have my thoughts. What do you think? It's definitely one of those. So shout out to James Joyce. Absolutely one of the best authors, at least in terms of giving us stuff to talk about. Very interesting book. And that's all I got. Flux signing out.